local sports news tonight. The Newcastle Knights off to the grand final. The Harold Matthews and SG Ballcams. First, it was just massive for the Newcastle Knights. They defeated the Eels in the Harold Matthews Cup preliminary final last week. It was just massive for the Knights, who were just too strong for their rivals right throughout the game.
Called out there as Vitano. Now I think it's going to be called back potentially. Well, Vitano was offside.
It was a massive one for the Knights. And because of that, the Harold Matthews Cup side managing to secure a win over Parramatta just in time to join the Canterbury Bulldogs into tomorrow's grand final.
Options back to the middle. Uta wants the crash play. Uta goes over. Jordan Uta picks up the try. Cody Hopwood, hard to stop. Last play now. Hagan for Loza. Holds it off. Vitano. Vitano on the inside of Lee. And Connor Vitano goes in for the Novocastrians. Their second try of the match. They lead 10 points to 4.
With the Knights leading 12-6, and of course Newcastle had to do something right up in the final few minutes of the second half.
Back off the left, the tongue comes out. Oh, it's cheeky, all right. Loza picks up.
Even though the Eels tried to do something to Newcastle,
one more here though for
but it was not enough, as Newcastle had to get a second chance, as the Knights got through to the grand final of the Harold Matthews Cup.
Now tell it to Eno, little chip over the top.
As the Knights got through to the Harold Matthews Cup grand final for the first time.
Oh goodness me! Game on, baby! 18 points to 16. The Newcastle Knights have booked their place in the grand final next week here at Leichhardt Oval. They'll take on the Dogs.
Still on the Knights, and it was just absolutely brilliant for their SG Ball Cup side, who are through to the grand final for the first time in 12 years after beating the Penrith Panthers with a historic 10-8 victory, and will join the Parramatta Eels in tomorrow's grand final. It was a historic one.
It's Aoki's try.
A try up in the first half became huge for Newcastle. And of course, the second half became a historic comeback for Newcastle, getting revenge onto the Penrith Panthers.
Kyle McCarthy started it with his run to draw a penalty on half.
Just in time to beat them with a historic win.
In the left-hand corner.
Just in the good times to join the Parramatta Eels in tomorrow's grand final.
It is Newcastle who march on to the grand final.
And of course, still on the Knights, and of course in the Women's Country Championship, the Newcastle Maitland Region Knights are into tomorrow's grand final against the Manawa Colts. Because of that, the Knights finished first. And because of that, it will be Northern versus Southern in tomorrow's decider.
Back infield, that's tackle 5. She's brought down the 10-metre line, 20 in from touch on the western side. Cook goes.
It was massive for Newcastle, with the Newcastle Maitland Region Knights women finishing in first, and also finishing undefeated right throughout the rest of the competition without a loss.
is the Newcastle Maitland Region 9.
And of course, so too did the ones who they'll face in tomorrow's grand final, the Monaro Colts, right in the Southern Conference. Because of that, and of course the Newcastle Maitland Region Knights hoping to secure a win in the Women's Country Championships.
4 points. Blackwell.
But of course with the grand final on at Leichhardt Oval tomorrow morning, and of course my tip is for the Newcastle Maitland Region Knights to win and beat the Monaro Colts, and of course with the Knights to be crowned major champions and premiers. And of course because of that, the Knights finished in first on the ladder and became minor premiers as well. And because of that, without losing an entire match. And also, they finished first alongside their southern rivals, the Monaro Colts. Greater Bracebridge has all but continued their undefeated winning start in round 2 of the 2023 Group 21 Rugby League competition. And that's all thanks to a huge victory against their rivals, the Demon Devils. It was huge for Greater Branxton, who were just too good for their rivals right throughout the game. And of course, Greater Branxton managed to score a lot of tries and of course win the match with a historic victory. Of course, Greater Branxton continued their undefeated winning run. But meanwhile in the other games, Muswellbrook hammered Aberdeen. Greater Branxton secured a 26-12 win over Denman, while Singleton outclassed Scone with a 32-8 victory. Round 3 kicks off on Saturday with Muswellbrook up against Greater Branxton, while Singleton and Aberdeen are up against each other, while Scone and Denman are of course up against each other. To round 2 of the AFL Hunter Central Coast, and the Cardiff Hawks have all but wrapped it all up on Tuesday in an Anzac Day match to beat the Warners Bay Bulldogs 99-32. It was just massive for the Hawks, who were just too strong right throughout the game.
Corey Hopper. Corey, welcome back.
But meanwhile in the women's, it was also Cardiff also wrapped it up with a incredible 61-2 victory.
Very similar to a goal in the second quarter. Running inside 50 off the left. A very good goal there for Sharon Ford.
But meanwhile in the other games, which of course started last weekend, and of course Maitland secured a win over Nelson Bay, 81-39, while Killarney Vale secured a win over Singleton. Elsewhere, Newcastle City secured a victory over Terrigal Avoca. Of course, Cardiff had a win over Warners Bay. But while in round 4, which starts tomorrow, Nelson Bay is up against Warners Bay, while Terrigal Avoca is back at home against local rivals, the entrants Bateau Bay. Also, Cardiff are back at home this weekend against Singleton. Also, Newcastle City are up against Maitland, while Killarney Vale has the bye. The good news also came above for Cardiff's women. They managed to defeat Warners Bay on Tuesday with a 61-2 victory in a Anzac Day game. Meanwhile, last weekend, Killarney Vale defeated Lake Macquarie. But meanwhile, in the other one, Newcastle City demolished Terrigal Avoca. still on Lokeway AFL, and of course Cardiff did exactly the same onto Anzac Day, but this time up against the entrants Bateau Bay, 34-10. Elsewhere, Maitland took down Muswellbrook, Terrigal Avoca were too strong for Newcastle City, and Killarney Vale were too strong in a local derby against Gosford.
But was it the right option at the time?
To round two of the Hunter Premier Rugby, and Mayweather Carlton secured a win on Tuesday over the Wanderers. It was just fantastic for Mayweather Carlton, who were just too good for their rivals right throughout the game. And because of that, Mayweather Carlton reclaimed the Anzac Day Shield. And of course, Mayweather managed to win 22-17 against the Wanderers. Maytime in the other games, which occurred last week, the Hamilton Hawks demolished Maitland, while the University of Newcastle defeated the Southern Beaches 43-19. Meanwhile, in round 3, which starts tomorrow and concludes on Sunday, the Hamilton Hawks are at home and are up against the Southern Beaches, while the Wanderers are up against Maitland, and the University of Newcastle are up against Mayweather Carlton. Still on to Hunter Premier Rugby, and of course in the women's competition, Mayweather Carlton didn't do exactly good. They went down to the Wanderers 27-5. Meanwhile, the rest of the competition is on tomorrow, as the Hamilton Hawks are up against the Southern Beaches Madawi. Also, Nelson Bay are up against the University of Newcastle, while the Wanderers are up against Maitland. And of course, it's a battle of the undefeated teams tomorrow in Newcastle Rugby League, when Cessnock are up against Maitland. And of course, Lakes United are up against Western Suburbs, while the Macquarie Scorpions are up against Central Newcastle. Maytime, South Newcastle are up against the Curry Bulldogs, while the Entrance Tigers are at home on the Central Coast, where they are up against Wyong on Sunday. And of course, the Northern Hawks have the bye. And of course, things look different up in reserve grade, and Lakes United and Maitland are up against each other, while Macquarie and Western Suburbs have a game on their hands. Also, South Newcastle and Curry are all playing up at Townsend Oval, while the Northern Hawks have a game up at Tomaree against Central Newcastle. While in the under-19s, Lakes United are up against the Northern Hawks. South Newcastle and Curry are up against each other. Also, Cessnock are up against Maitland. While in the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby League, and in round 2, South Newcastle are up against Dora Creek, the Katara Bears are up against Windale, and the University of Newcastle Seahorses are up against the Waratah Mayfield Cheetahs. The meantime in the other one, the match between Curry and Abermain was forced to be called off, while the matches between Kersley, Dungog, Fingal Bay and Maitland will go ahead tomorrow. And of course, Lakes United are up against Budgewoi, while Wallsend Maryland are up against Dora Creek, Rimba's up against Shortland. And of course, tomorrow, the Glendale Gorillas are up against the Morisset Bulls, while West Wallsend is up against the Northern Lakes Warriors. And of course, tonight, Clarencetown are up against Waratah Mayfield, while tomorrow, Raymond Terrace is up against Aberglasslyn. Meanwhile, Patterson River is up against Gloucester, and the Kooraroos are up against Tea Gardens. In the other one, and of course tomorrow, Glendale is up against Waratah Mayfield. While in Saturday's games, West Wallsend is up against the Stockton Sharks, while East Maitland is up against the Morpeth Bulls, and the Cardiff Cobras are up at home at the number 2 field against the Hinton Hornets, hoping to secure a win. And of course, the Cardiff Cobras are hoping to have a win. In the women's, and and the University of Newcastle are up against Waratah, while the Katawa Bears are up against Central Newcastle, while the University of Newcastle Seahorses are up against the Stroud Raiders. While tonight, Clarence Town are up against Dungog, and Cessnock are up against Shortland. Raymond Terrace is up against the Wabakal, while the Cardiff Cobblers are up against the Swansea Cave Swans. Also, Hamilton is up against Morpeth. But meanwhile, Raymond Terrace is up against Stockton, while Glendale is up against West Maitland. West Wallsend are up against the Tea Gardens, and Thornton Beresfield are up against Aberglasslyn, while Wallsend Maryland have the bye. To round 9 of the Hunters National Premier League men's competition, and Newlampton are up against Newcastle Olympic, while Adamstown are up against Broadmeadow Magic, while Maitland is up against Cooks Hill, Valentine and Edgeworth are up against each other at the Hunters Sports Centre, while Lake Macquarie and the Western Workers are up against each other, while Charlestown Missouri take on Lambton. While round 8 of the women's competition and Newcastle Olympic are up against Warners Bay, Adamstown are at home against the Mid-Coast, Maitland is home against Charlestown Missouri, and Newlampton are up against Broadmeadow Magic. Maytime in round 10 of the Northern League 1 competition, Wallsend has the bye, while Singleton are at home against Cessnock. So too are West Wallsend, who of course take on Toronto Awaba. Cahiba is also at home. They take on Belmont Swansea, and also South Cardiff is also at home, where they are on against Thornton. And also South Cardiff is hoping to secure a win after last week's draw against West Wallsend. Anyway, that's about it for now, and don't forget, from all of us here, go to Newcastle Knights, of course, and don't forget, from all of us here, good night.
He was called out of it. Furtado on the inside of Lee, and Connor Furtado goes in down the pass. The Knights set light now. It's Aote's try. They have tackles. Smith for Blackman. Blackman now, they go out to Sharp. They're in the corner of the Knights. Kyle McCarthy started it with his run to draw a penalty on halfway, and he finishes it in the left-hand corner. Flag is in the air, and it will be joined by red and blue flags. It is Newcastle who march on to the grand final with revenge in their nostrils. On the western side, goes Oakley. Oakley looking to make her way through as he dives over, catches the defender's napping. Ebony Oakley gets the nice second. Makes it leading up to 8 points to 0. Goldsmith with it. Goldsmith in open territory. Stopped short of the line as she put it down. Made it short. Coming off. Cross. The outside ball is brilliant. And the Maitland Newcastle Knights score the second try, closing in on half-time. Combined tackle there again by the Titans. This is Grande. T's international steps off the left. Gets taken down, tries to offload and gets it out. Goldsmith now, bypasses Lukashewicz. Goes to Trapman. Trapman, can she bundle her way over? She got room to release. This is an effort in from Oakley! Is Ebony Oakley over? The siren's gone. Maitland Newcastle Knights are the Women's Country Championships Northern Conference champions.